Well, hi everybody and welcome to BPD Update. I'm Chief Steve Strachan of the Bremerton Police Department. If you watch this show regularly, you know that we do just one thing here, and that is let you know what's going on around the Bremerton Police Department. Try to keep you up to date about what we're doing and what's coming up. As we always do at the end of this show, we will go through our statistics and some of our numbers, tell you what's going on in terms of trends around the city, give you a couple notable cases and things going on around our department. But the first part of the show, we're going to talk about a serious subject, one that sometimes people don't want to talk a lot about, and that is active shooters, terrorist attacks, and what we as the police department do to be as prepared as we can be for that. And then also what you can do, probably even more importantly for you, what you can do, and not to feel helpless and just sort of terrified about these kinds of things and the prospect of an active shooter or some sort of a terrorist incident. This is not just conceptual. We're taping this show in early December, and just a couple of days ago was when the San Bernardino attacks occurred at a social service building in San Bernardino, and I'm sure you know a lot about that. It has now been established by the FBI that there is a terrorist link to people connected to the Mideast who were and are residents. The male in that attack was a resident who was born here in the United States, I think in the state of Illinois. His spouse was from outside the country, but this was also a workplace where the male in this couple, the couple that committed this act, the male worked in that workplace at a social service agency. So it leads to a whole lot of questions. How does that change what we do as police officers and as police departments in terms of our training and how we respond to an exigent attack or an active shooter like this? And then secondly, how has this changed in terms of now what we're now seeing as a homegrown terrorist attack in our country? When we use the word terrorist attack, that's sort of a loaded term. There have been a lot of domestic terrorist attacks. You could describe the shooting in South Carolina by someone who was motivated as a racist against African Americans. That's certainly a terrorist attack. He was from that state. Terrorist attacks sometimes mean it has to be something outside the country. As I mentioned, this man was from our country, was born in the United States. So it's sort of a flexible term, but what it means is just the word terrorist means it's meant to terrify. It's meant to create fear with the public, and for the anxiety and the change in our lifestyle that it drives. It's been talked to death. If you flip on CNN or MSNBC, they'll be talking about it all day. I'm not going to do that. What I want to do is talk about, first of all, the fact that, is Bremerton not a target? It's as much of a target as anywhere else. We certainly have areas in this city, including the naval base, including other federal facilities that certainly we view as potential targets, and the federal government views as potential targets. And we have an extensive amount of security because of that in this city. I've worked in cities that don't have a lot of federal and military facilities before, and as somebody who came from the outside, we have a tremendous amount of security and safeguards for that very reason. And that certainly exists in our city, and we work very closely with the U.S. Navy, we work with the FBI, and we work with Naval Criminal Intelligence, NCIS, for all of those things. Secondly, is it something that could occur? It could, both with a military or federal facility, but as happened in San Bernardino, it can happen at something like a social service building or any office building, a movie theater, a church, a school. We've seen all of those things become targets of an active shooter or somebody intending to cause harm through a terrorist act. So let me talk a little bit about this. How's that changed for us? In 1999, I think it was in 1999, the Columbine shooting occurred in Colorado. 2 students at that high school went in, and of course, a horrible, tragic event. A lot of students were shot and killed, and the police responded to that the way that we used to respond to these kinds of incidents. The officers would show up, they would wait for resources to gather. It was believed that time was on our side, and we'd wait it out and negotiate with the people involved, and of course that was just the wrong thing to do in Columbine. So that drove a change in tactics, and this has been discussed widely, but over the last 15 years or so, the tactics to approach an active shooter situation have changed completely to really the opposite of what they used to be, and that is the first few officers that get there go in immediately and try to stop the threat. Much more dangerous, we don't know nearly as much, but it's the right thing to do in that situation. There are too many incidents to recount Newtown, Aurora, I mean, unfortunately they go on and on. Even locally, the Cafe Racer incident, the Seattle Pacific shooting just a couple of years ago. But if you look at the Umpqua Community College incident, which was just a few months ago from now, that was one where the immediate response of law enforcement made a real difference, and the protocols we use for active shooters made a real difference. That person was still in the midst of conducting violence with firearms at the Umpqua Community College, and one of the first people to get there was, I believe, a detective from local law enforcement. And so he wasn't a SWAT officer, he didn't have a rifle, he had a handgun. But he was one of the first people there, and I believe it was either he or he and another officer went in and did confront the person who was shooting. I believe the person took their own life before the officers engaged. I think it's not really clear what happened, but basically the threat was stopped because of the actions of law enforcement. That time it worked with a person who was by themselves, who was self-destructive, who was potentially mentally unstable. And that's the traditional sort of model that we've seen over the last 15 years for active shooters. The incident in San Bernardino is different. That was coordinated. We now know it was a husband and wife, but it was more than one person. It was two people in a coordinated attack using firearms. It is believed that they had ballistic vests or bulletproof vests. They had explosives as well. So it wasn't basically that lone mentally ill person who was self-destructive. They also left. And they left in a vehicle, and they were confronted later on. Very different than, again, that active shooter situation that we've seen in the last 15 years. What does that mean? It means that we have to really change the way we approach these things, and we probably aren't going to know exactly what we're dealing with, and we're going to have to respond as best we can, whether it's a lone active shooter who might be involved in some sort of mental illness or instability and who's self-destructive. It might be a coordinated attack that may be driven by somebody trying to commit a terrorist act. And now we have to really deal with all of those things at the same time. There is no simple answer to this in terms of our response, but that's how our training will be changing over the next, well, I was going to say several weeks or months, but really it's days. I mean, we're talking about these things as we speak. So that change is occurring, and I want to let you know what we're doing, what law enforcement agencies across the state and the nation are doing, and we're having this conversation right now. As always, we want to keep you up to date on what's happening. The second thing I want to mention is this. The Boston bombing, the marathon bombing, was one where that was a really unusual, sort of a game-changing incident, which again was a coordinated attack for people who were trying to commit a terrorist act. When they did, there was a bomb and then another bomb that went off. And as you know, there was a long sort of manhunt that resulted in a running gun battle at MIT in Boston, where an officer was killed. More running gun battle, a running gun battle in a suburban city outside of Boston, where eventually one of the individuals was killed, the other was taken into custody. And you might remember that the governor of Massachusetts actually sort of closed down Boston. He asked, I think the phrase was he ordered people to stay inside, whether or not he has the authority to do that, but he was telling people stay inside. I've never seen that before. But the fact is, one of the good things that came out of the Boston Marathon bombing was the Boston Police Department had a pre-existing relationship with the community through social media, particularly Facebook and Twitter. And a lot of people were signed up for the Twitter feed from the Boston Police Department, and they were able to directly communicate with residents about what was happening, what they wanted them to do, how to stay safe, how to do the best they could in that really difficult situation. We also have a Twitter feed, and I would encourage you, again, God forbid it ever happen in a community like ours, but part of the reason we have that Twitter feed is to get information directly to people who sign up for it. So I'd encourage you to take a look at our Twitter feed. It has things like our weekly newsletter, crime prevention alerts, things like that. We don't send out a ton of tweets, so we won't fill up your cell phone, but we encourage you to take a look and consider signing up for our Twitter account for that very reason, so we can communicate directly with you in case anything happens. I'll give you an example. The Motel 6 explosion a while back affected a lot of people. A lot of people wanted to know what was happening. Sent a lot of information out over our Twitter feed, so I encourage you to take a look at that. Finally, as we finish up talking about this difficult subject, let's talk about what you can do. You go back before Columbine, that changed tactics. Before 9/11, the way that people on airplanes react to attempted takeovers has changed, hasn't it? No longer passive, now it is much more aggressive. Be proactive and take control. And I think that that's an important point to remember as we talk about how to deal in an effective and thoughtful way to, the new world, which is active shooters, mentally unstable people with guns, and people attempting to commit terrorist acts. And they're trying to terrorize us. And I think the best thing we can do is to be as prepared as we can be. We're not going to be victims. We're going to do the best we can in a difficult situation. I'd like to show you a 5-minute video. This was made just a couple years ago by the city of Houston as part of their preparedness plan. And it's the best I've seen in terms of a very simple, very direct set of instructions on what you can do. It's simple and it's straightforward. Most of all, it's empowering. The title of it is just 3 words, and that is the 3 most important things you can come away with, and that is run, hide, fight. And those are the 3 things you should look at doing rather than being paralyzed if something like this happens. Number 1, run. Number 2, hide. Number 3, fight. Let's take a look at this video. It's called Run, Hide, Fight.
It may feel like just another day at the office, but occasionally, life feels more like an action movie than reality. The authorities are working hard to protect you and to protect our public spaces. But sometimes bad people do bad things. Their motivations are different. The warning signs may vary, but the devastating effects are the same. And unfortunately, you need to be prepared for the worst. If you were ever to find yourself in the middle of an active shooter event, your survival may depend on whether or not you have a plan. The plan doesn't have to be complicated. There are 3 things you could do that make a difference. Run, hide, fight. First and foremost, if you can get out, do. Always try and escape or evacuate, even when others insist on staying. Encourage others to leave with you, but don't let them slow you down with indecision. Remember what's important, you, not your stuff. Leave your belongings behind and try to find a way to get out safely. Trying to get yourself out of harm's way needs to be your number 1 priority. Once you are out of the line of fire, try to prevent others from walking into the danger zone and call 911. If you can't get out safely, you need to find a place to hide. Act quickly and quietly. Try to secure your hiding place the best you can. Turn out lights, and if possible, remember to lock doors. Silence your ringer and vibration mode on your cell phone. And if you can't find a safe room or closet, try to conceal yourself behind large objects that may protect you. Do your best to remain quiet and calm. As a last resort, if your life is at risk, whether you are alone or working together as a group, fight. Act with aggression. improvise weapons, disarm him, and commit to taking the shooter down, no matter what. Try to be aware of your environment. Always have an exit plan. Know that in an incident like this, victims are generally chosen randomly. The event is unpredictable and may evolve quickly. The first responders on the scene are not there to evacuate or tend to the injured. They are well trained and are there to stop the shooter. Your actions can make a difference for your safety and survival. Be aware and be prepared. And if you find yourself facing an active shooter, there are 3 key things you need to remember to survive. Run, hide, fight.
So that's some important information. And again, I've talked to some folks that have seen this video and they say, you know, everyone who's got a workplace, everyone who's going to a school should know about this. And I encourage you to do that. It's not copyrighted, it's on YouTube. You can Google it and bring it up very easily. You can send it to people via email very easily. It's on our Twitter feed. Again, if you want to look at our Twitter feed, it's there. You can forward it to people. It's also available in Spanish. So if you know folks who speak Spanish and would need this information, just Google the same thing, put in Houston, RUN.HIDE.FIGHT video. It'll come right up on YouTube, and there's a Spanish version as well. The other thing I'd really focus on from that video, and it's important to know, reminds me a little bit back when we used to talk about self-defense tactics with people. If somebody is accosted by someone and the best way to defend themselves, they mention that it's a last resort. It's not the first choice. The last resort is to fight. But if a person is to fight, you need to commit fully to it. I mean, it's all in. This is truly life or death, and it's all in. And it's scary. The fact is, if a person works in an office or if they work in a school or in a mall, you didn't sign up for this stuff. I get it. Nobody signed up for this. But it's a thing to be aware of, again, without being afraid. Sort of like the water. You know, if you're going to go swimming, be careful. You don't have to be afraid. And I think that's the best way to approach this. So just some information about a timely topic and something to be aware of. If you have any questions about it, as always, feel free to let us know here at the Bremerton Police Department. Let's talk a little bit, as we always do, on BPD Update about our statistics and trends, a few numbers to give you some idea of what's going on around the city. This is for the month of October 2015, the last month for which we have statistics. So let's look at our reports first of all. The number of reports or incidents that were handled by our department was at 861 in October of 2015. These are things for which a report was written. It's not every call we went to, but things for which a report was written. You can see that's down substantially from 2 years before in October of 2013. We're always way under 1,000 pretty much every month now. We used to be way over 1,000 at one time a couple of years ago. Our number of arrests are pretty consistent from last year, 165. You can see domestic violence calls were at 21. That is fortunately down from 2 years ago. Our number of DUIs was at 10 for the month of October. It's a little misleading. Our officers make a lot of contacts with suspected drunk drivers, and the majority of them are turned over to the Washington State Patrol. You may know that the State Patrol is headquartered right here in Bremerton. They're close by, and they are always happy to work with us as partners to take those arrests, and we turn those over to State Patrol quite frequently. So that doesn't mean that's how many drunk drivers are arrested in our city. That's how many we didn't turn over to the State Patrol. The number of traffic crashes down a little bit from last year at 69. That includes injury and non-injury. And then mental health calls, you can see we're at 19. That's calls that are just mental health calls, not other calls that involve mental health. Let's take a look at our frequent flyer focus areas. We talk about this a lot on this show. These are the sort of high frequency chronic offenders that really affect quality of life in the city of Bremerton, and we try to track some of these misdemeanor crimes that are a little bit less significant but really affect quality of life. The first one is trespassing, criminal trespass on property. You can see was up just 3 from October of 2014. Theft was down, that's a good number. It was down 11 to a total of 68 for October of 2015. Shoplifting up a little bit. We've been seeing that trend downward month to month for the last few months, but it was up a little bit in October. We'll probably see it go up in November and December. It's a sad thing to say, but shoplifting and theft go up a little bit when we get toward the holiday time. Vehicle theft is at 10. That's up from the same month the year before. But, and I've said this before, 10 for a city of our size is not a real high number, but of course 10 is way too many, particularly if it's your vehicle. Residential burglaries are up a little bit at 12 for October of 2015, but that's way down from 2 years ago when we had 26. The non-residential burglaries are about the same as last year at 13. Vehicle prowling up just a little bit to 17. We're seeing that again trend upward a little bit. We were down around 11 and 12 per month. Now we're up to 17. Again, for a city our size, that isn't a crazy number, but it's the same thing. If your vehicle's prowled, that's a big deal. And a good reminder, please lock your car. Some people will say, well, locking my car means that they're going to break my window. We find that they don't break windows a lot. Some people do, but not very often. It's usually pull and door handles, so please lock your car. Trespassing at 20. And you can see malicious mischief up just a little bit. We'll talk about a couple specific cases in the month of October and November. We had 3 bank robberies in the space of about a week and a half. In late October, early November, at the U.S. Bank and the Wells Fargo banks here in Bremerton. Very unusual. We don't get a lot of bank robberies in our city. Thankfully, it's a very serious crime, obviously. And the suspects were captured. It was 2 individuals who were associated with each other. We have a photo there that I just showed you. They were captured on the 2nd and the 4th of November. They were jailed and they are being charged. I want to thank the public. We got some good tips on this. We put the photos out there, the surveillance photos that we had. Also, Washington's Most Wanted and Crime Stoppers led us to the suspects in this case. They were local, recently released from prison for, you'll be surprised to hear this, bank robbery, and now they're going back. We also had the really tragic case, a horrible thing, a torture case involving a cat a while back, several weeks ago. A lot of people followed that very closely. You may know that after the arrest of the juvenile, when he went to juvenile detention, that the juvenile was sentenced just last week, late November. He received 65 weeks in juvenile detention. That's a very, very extensive sentence for a juvenile for a case like this. The presumptive sentence for that particular crime for a juvenile is 30 days. Now you may think that's crazy, you may have an opinion about that, but keep in mind that the Superior Court judge in Kitsap County sentenced this person to 65 months, which includes extensive treatment, and I think that's what people are concerned about. So I really have to say I think I'm very pleased with the way that that case was handled. We really appreciate the Kitsap County Prosecutor's Office, the very hard work that they put in on this one. A very serious case, and one that really we want that young man to improve and not to have issues in the future, as well as really justice for a heinous act that a lot of people cared a great deal about. On a much happier topic, let me talk for a little bit about Tip-A-Cop. That occurred on the 24th of October at the Red Robin, close by, actually just into the city of Silverdale. But we were pleased to partner with the Kitsap County Sheriff's Office on the Tip-A-Cop, and this is where police officers help to serve restaurant patrons at Red Robin. Red Robin's been a great partner on this. This is to benefit Special Olympics, and so people are basically told, if you'd like to give a tip, we're not going to give the tip to the waiter. They give up those tips to give to Special Olympics, and if you wanted to give a little bit more, feel free. And that's what the officers are there to do. We also just are outside to greet people, give tours of our squad cars, and to talk to young people. You'll see a picture here of K-9 Officer Duke Russell along with Dusty, his K-9 partner, meeting a young resident outside of the Red Robin. And on the right, there's a great picture of Detective Aaron Elton serving some folks. Over $5,000 was raised for Special Olympics. Great cause. We've been doing it every year for a long time. $5,000, a great amount of money for one day. And we should mention that over 16 people gave $100 or more as a tip that day to Special Olympics. I want to thank Aaron and Duke and other members of our department that participated, and especially Lieutenant Jeannie Elton from the Kitsap County Sheriff's Office, who does a great job coordinating this every single year. A couple more quick things before we leave. First of all, BCAPs are volunteers. You've heard about that before if you watch the show. We'll give you a couple numbers. First of all, we've got our new black and white car out and about. doing patrol. For a while we had an unmarked Ford Taurus, but now we got a black and white Crown Victoria, and it says Auxiliary Patrol right on the side. So you'll see that out and about with the yellow light bar on top, and those are our BCAPS volunteers doing patrol. So from July 1st to November 30th, our BCAPS volunteers have done 42 volunteer patrols. They also worked at the Blackberry and Minute festivals, and that makes up over 514 hours of extra patrol from our volunteers. We really appreciate all that they're doing for us in terms of park patrol, vacant house patrol, and vacation house checks. It's great stuff, and we really appreciate our partners as well as our coordinator, Tom Danner, who's doing some great work getting that program built up and started. We'll keep you up to date on that. Last thing I want to mention is this. Brand new officer you might see around town with he's going through field training right now. His name is Derek Ada. Great article about Derek Ada and his brother Jordan Ada, who is a current Bremerton police officer, and their dad, by the way, is a retired Kitsap County Sheriff's Office deputy. They're a local family, and both Derek and Jordan are now with our department. And as I mentioned, there's a great article in the Kitsap Sun if you get a chance to take a look at it. Derek is now out and about in training with our officers, so if you see Derek, say hi. We want to welcome him to the BPD team. A lot of different information this month. Again, just to remind you, if you'd like to see that video, just Google it or shoot us an email. We'll be happy to send you the link for Run, Hide, Fight. Great information. We encourage you to take a look and to forward it to others. And again, just stay safe. And again, we will continue to have a thoughtful conversation about what can be a very, very scary topic. That's what's going on around BPD this month. We hope you appreciate the update, and we hope you appreciate, or I should say, I appreciate you watching each month. We'll see you next time on BPD Update.
Woo!